Ah, okay, perfect.
I'm about to just welcome everybody.
Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen who have joined us on this Dr. Fundi channel via multiple social media platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and also on Twitter. Today we have a very interesting conversation in prospect. We are hosting a gentleman who goes by the name of the Salesman, aka the Salesman, Mr. Bongani Chinkanda. So he is our guest today. Um, it's so lovely for me to host another entrepreneur. I normally host professionals who are working for big corporates, people who are in government and people who are doing other things. But this time I feel like I'm hosting a fellow traveler in this journey of entrepreneurship.
Yes.
There's so much in common between what he's going to be sharing and some of my stories. So, you know, when people look at entrepreneurship from far, they actually think it's this big, sexy thing where you're swimming in money. They don't know that, there are times where things are so bad that, you don't know whether you should wake up tomorrow and actually go into your work. But anyway, let me tell you a little bit about my guest, Mr. Chinkanda. Bongani was born and raised in Malawi. He went and schooled in Zimbabwe, in Harare. And once he was done with his schooling, he came to South Africa and did a degree at Rhodes University, that's in Grahamstown. It's now called Makanda. Now, once he was done with his degree, he worked in trade and shopper marketing for companies including Unilever, BP, Kraft Foods, Kimberly Clark from 2003 all the way to 2008 before he actually embarked on a career in advertising. In 2008, he formed a company called Zua Media. And this company was actually a company that was a supplier of promotional goods in the greater SADC, region. Malawi, Zimbabwean markets, Namibia, Botswana, and even here in South Africa. And they had big chip clients, like SAB, like Colgate, like Hollard. And now those are big companies when it comes to, what they call it, fast moving consumer goods or something like that. All right. But then, he decided then later on that the company should actually grow. And he merged his company with another company to extend the markets. And then in 2017, he joined what they call HDI Youth Marketers. And at the time, they had a dream, of African brand stories, and they wanted to grow into the rest of the continent. So they expanded and had a presence, as far as Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Uganda. In 2020, he left HDI, and he then formed a company called Bravado with his partners, which is still a mass market advertising agency. And he is the MD and the shareholder of the Brave Group. He describes himself as somebody who is very strong believer in solving client business problems. So he's client orientated. Well, you can't not be as a marketer because it starts with you understanding what are the needs of the market. So if you
Sure.
don't know what the needs of the market are, then you might as well, not do any marketing because otherwise you are going to miss the spot. So he is a strong believer then in being client orientated. He's also, focused a lot in youth and mass markets, and those are obviously growing markets. the youth market in the continent of Africa is a big market. And also the mass markets, the markets that are normally not covered by, the big guys. Those are the markets that actually, if you can get in there, then your product will actually do well. He's also got a passion of developing other entrepreneurs and leaders in the creative economy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Bongani, the salesman Chinkanda.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doctor. Thanks for having me. I think it's an honor to be here. Before we went live, I was just interested in seeing your growth as well, in terms of being the voice in the wilderness when it comes to COVID-19 and other issues and mental health being part of it.
Yeah.
So I'm honored to be here, and I think it's a conversation that has been long overdue.
Indeed. I mean, last year, we had some work that we were doing, for a short while, I think about 2 to 3 weeks, around issues of anxiety. And that's when I saw that actually you have an interest in this area of mental health. But at the time, I didn't know what was the reason for the interest. Only a few weeks ago, you started opening up about your story around how you actually got to suffer from mental illness, when things were not going so well in your business. And I think that's the part we're going to talk about a lot, because at this point, so many months since COVID-19 started, the whole world, including here in South Africa, a lot of people are struggling with issues of mental health. People who were previously diagnosed with issues of mental health, but also people who are having those issues for the first time. So it is very important. And generally, in the African continent, there is, this stigma that seems to be associated with issues of mental health. And when I say African continent, South Africa included, the rest of the continent, generally, we don't pay enough attention to issues of mental health and mental illness. And some people actually believe that it's taboo, especially for a man, to acknowledge that, they are going through stress, they are going through issues of mental illness. If anything, they would rather give another, title to that kind of situation. So, but anyway, let's begin our discussion with, we won't spend too much time on this, but Bongani, he was born in Malawi. Just tell us a little bit about the family you were born into, the kind of values that were instilled in you, in that family, the kind of community values that, you grew up, looking at, that are still useful as you walk on your journey of life today.
Sure. So I grew up in a home where it was the three of us. My sister is 4 years older than me, and my younger sister is 4 years younger, so I'm the only boy. My father was a banker, and my mom was a nurse, a health practitioner for a very long time, and she got retrenched and started a business. And we're a Christian home. I wouldn't say we were very much in a home where gender roles were particularly stressed, that girls did this, and because I was the only boy, my father was a strong believer that men need to be able to do the housework like anybody else. But because of being the only boy and ultimately the person that carries the name, there was a little bit of pressure on making sure that I achieve certain things, as being the boy and the man in the house. And Malawi is a very tight-knit community, Christian values mostly, and very supportive in that sense. So growing up, I did witness the struggles that my father would have with his career, because life is life. He lost
Yeah.
his job once, or I think twice actually. But he managed to fight himself back. I saw my mom get retrenched, start a business, and she's still running it to today. I think it's almost been more than 25 years she's been running her business.
Yeah.
So that was the sort of home we grew up in. Then I think the other thing that we witnessed growing up was the scourge of HIV and AIDS, where my mom lost, I think, 4 siblings in a space of 4 years. And we then, my parents had decided to adopt my cousins. So by extension, I've got another, in African culture, don't call them cousins. So I've got a brother and a sister. So it's 5 of us now. And it's been like that since I can remember.
Yeah.
Because that was in the early 90s when my aunts passed on.
Yeah.
So that was my upbringing. And then you mentioned going to Zimbabwe for school. So there was a time the economy in Malawi was very difficult for middle-class Malawians. So you neither could not afford a good private school, but the government schools were not that great. So the only option was to send kids across the border to Zimbabwe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that would make you then somebody who can speak quite a number of languages, the ones from Malawi,
Yes.
and also from Zim.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So being in Harare, is that Shona, the language
Shona, yes.
spoken
Yes.
there?
I speak very fluent Shona.
Is it?
Yeah, ndotaura zvakanaka. So even here, it's funny when you're at a restaurant or you go out on a holiday and suddenly you hear, no, man, I can recognize this accent. Then immediately you connect with the person. But I don't speak Ndebele at all. I was up in Mashonaland, so that's why Shona is more my language than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. That's lovely. All right. And so, what are the highlights though in your schooling years in Zim?
So I think for me, because I was there in upper high school, so from Form 3 all the way to A levels, so that's Form 6. I think for me the highlights was being a prefect at school, being the deputy head of house in the boarding school, playing first team rugby, being in the choir.
What? No. Wait. You played first team rugby.
I was a flank, number 6.
Oh, okay. I was looking at the size of your body, and I'm thinking, okay, this guy was you wanted to commit suicide or something.
No. I was small, but I held my own. I had 2 other friends. One was an 8th man, and another was a flank. And we used to laugh that they used to protect me anyway. So I played first team rugby in my last year at school. I was part of the Interact Club. I was part of debate. So those were the highlights. And I think the other highlight was just being away from home and being quite independent of my parents. I started making decisions quite early in my life. They would send me money. You decide whether you buy shoes or you blow it up on groceries. Although on weekends I'd spend sometimes at my aunt's. That gave me a footing in terms of independence. Just being not only in boarding school, but being in another country, because I'd only go home at the end of term. So I'd be away from home for 3 months straight.
Right. So you mentioned that you were involved in the school societies, like Interact and debating. What advantage do you think that gave you? That actually is giving you an advantage, over other people in your space.
I think it gave me a certain level of confidence to be able to stand up in front of strangers and be able to express myself. It also gave me a level of thinking things, always questioning things. And I guess we'll get to how I got into my entrepreneurship journey. But I think just being there, and I also encourage my kids to be involved in cultural activities, because there's a certain level of confidence that one needs, especially as an entrepreneur. I always say, as much as I know I am the salesman, I would not, even if somebody told me right now that we need to go and pitch an idea to the president of the country, I wouldn't be scared at all, because over time I've developed that level of confidence, which sometimes can border on arrogance, but yeah, I think those formative years helped me.
And I think the other thing you didn't mention there, maybe you're going to talk about it later, the fact that generally salespeople, they don't mind rejection.
Yes.
You know?
We don't, because ultimately you look at the situation, and sometimes you'd be like, oh, okay, your loss as the client, but also you look at the learning in terms of, okay, so what did I not get right there? Maybe it's how I dressed, it's how I showed up, or the language that I used. I didn't listen, I didn't communicate. So you don't take a missed opportunity as a loss. You take it as a learning opportunity to prepare for your next interaction with the next potential client.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that it's a little bit of a challenge for me. Cold calling generally a problem for me. The ground needs to be prepared a little bit. Then I'll come and do my thing.
I'm with you there. I'm more of a warm caller than a cold caller. So there's this description of a warm call is when Dr. Fundi introduces you an email to his colleague and say, oh, meet Bongani. Bongani is in marketing. Maybe you guys can work together. So by the time I'm calling John, it's more of a warm call than a cold call.
Exactly. That's the one that works for me. The other one, no, I don't have a very thick skin to be able to take the rejection that normally comes with that. But anyway, so you finished your what do you call it, your A levels, and then you were thinking about tertiary now. So how did you then decide what you wanted to do? That took you to Rhodes University.
So after my A levels, I spent a gap year at home helping my parents because being in Malawi, almost every family farms somehow, subsistence farming, so not huge farms. So you've got a plot, you grow maize, have got cows or chickens. So I really was chasing girls in that year, learning how to drive, and deciding what I was going to do, but also helping my parents to farm. So the deal was always they had a pickup. So they would always tell me, as long as from 8 o'clock until 1 o'clock, you're doing the farm work and the housework, you can go chase girls with our car in the evening. So I would make sure.
That was a good deal. That was a good deal.
It was always a good deal.
That gave you a competitive advantage over the other guys. I mean, how many people got access to cars?
Yeah, exactly. But it was a pickup. So I remember once with a friend, we're dating friends, and we went to pick them up. So it's a pickup, and I was driving, and my then girlfriend was in front, and then we had to go pick up the other couple. So we get there, and my friend says, "No, you came with your pickup. You're the one who's going to sit at the back. I'll drive so that my girlfriend and your girlfriend can sit in front." So that was that gap here, being naughty. But then I had to obviously go and study.
No. Wait, Bongani. So, but when you look at that year, because parents, when a child, talks about dad, mom, I want to take a gap year, they'll feel like it's a wasted year.
Yes.
So, just looking back, what value did that, bring to you before you went on with your tertiary studies?
I think for me, it gave me time to think of avenues of what I wanted to study. But also, it also gave me an opportunity to just grow. I think if it's possible, if finances allow, I think gap years are important, because the transition from matric to tertiary is too quick, and you then find sometimes I see the results of people struggling in their first year because they're still experimenting, they're still having fun. Then you end up people who need to be doing 3-year degrees do 4-year degrees. So they should have had a gap year anyway. So by the time I was getting to Rhodes University in 2000, I was quite mature already. I had fun. I think there was a point where my brain was like, okay, now you need to study. Around September 1999, I was like, no. I need to go now. So that's when I went to Grahamstown.
How did you, firstly, what did you want to study, and what made you choose Grahamstown? I mean, you passed Wits, Pretoria, and so many other universities, and you went to this university that is in a very small town called Grahamstown.
I think it was a function
is it the Rhodes thing, the connection? Rhodes,
with Rhodesia. I think there was that element, but I think it was also a function of what I studied in my A level. So I did English, geography, and history. So it was very difficult to go into UCT Wits because they're very much engineering, the sciences universities. But Grahamstown, you've got journalism, you've got psychology, economics. So they were quite open in terms of looking at my application in terms of what to study. And they were the first ones that accepted me to get in. And when I went, that time I used to watch, remember LA Law with this handsome young man, I forgot his name, but I wanted to be a lawyer because it looked cool. You'd stand up in court and argue your way through, and because being a guy, you'd get the girl. So I thought, no, I need to be a lawyer. so when I went to Rhodes,
and you use your debating skills.
Exactly. Of course, I'm going to win cases. I win debate. But to my shock and awe, there was lots of reading and case studying at Rhodes when I did my degree. So I found psychology, economics quite interesting at that time. So I pursued ultimately, that time they used to call it legal theory. So you do 3 years of legal theory and another subject. And then after that, you do 2 years of actual law. But when I got to my third year, my father phoned me to say, my son, you have to find a job. I don't have any more money for you to do your LLB. And then there was a career fair somehow. And I remember getting these application forms from Unilever and applying. And Unilever, when they came, they were like, no, we need to see you, Mr. Chinkanda, and got a job and went to Durban for work.
And that was before you finished?
No. That was when I was at Rhodes. Oh, we still had to discuss Rhodes, but that was how I ended up studying economics and law.
Yeah. All right. But in that period,
yes,
your interests now, and because at the end of the day, we're going to end up with you being an entrepreneur. So yes, you came from a family where already, one of the parents was actually running a business, so that must have given you a taste of entrepreneurship. But then, you had not concretized it in your head that I want to be an entrepreneur. So at what point during your tertiary studies, or at that point, you still had not thought about it, you still wanted a career that will make you one of the, guys who go up the ladder of corporate?
So funny enough, I was interested in people that build stuff, right? So even when I was at Rhodes, I was like, this university came out of nowhere, and how did they build it, and so for me it was always an area of interest, but I didn't know it as entrepreneurship. Just hold on, doctor, just give me a second.
All right. We are still continuing with our conversation with the salesman, Mr. Bongani Chinkanda. We're just going through just the history of how he grew up in Malawi, Zim, and his early years in South Africa as a student at Rhodes University in Grahamstown. Right, you're back.
I'm back. So there was a bit of a noise there. What I was saying is that I was always interested in
people who build stuff.
Build stuff, you know, car companies. And so even when I went home, I always used to, and I remember the one thing that I always liked in my teen years, a friend of mine, we used to always play business. So we'd own companies, build companies, sell companies, but I didn't understand that was entrepreneurship, but I liked that more than anything else. So even at varsity, I always used to wonder, when I think back now, is to say, but how did these institutions come about?
Yeah.
How did this business come about? How did these car companies come about? But then I mean, you're just at varsity, enjoying yourself, and you know, at Rhodes, what we are known for, drinking and going around, but still working hard.
Yes, you know, all those places now for students, they call them digs.
Yes, exactly.
Then it used to be Spare. Everybody would go to Spare. I'm not sure.
Yes. So that's where we used to go. Like when you had found a girl and you wanted to impress her, you take her to the Spare on I think it was Church Street or one of those streets. And take her there, you know, and buy her ribs and chips. So at that time, that's what we were thinking about.
Yeah. So anyway, you were then telling us that you know, you then focus more on economics and law.
Yes.
And graduated when?
I graduated in 2002. So I finished in 2002. Graduation was 2003. But then that's when I finished my economics and law degree, and then ended up going to Durban and working at Unilever in trade marketing. So to explain what trade marketing is, it's a component of sales. So ultimately, it's the in between marketing and sales, and the FMCG guys described it as trade marketing. So I got into trade marketing, which had to do with key account management, and I worked on the ShopRite account at Unilever.
You know, in the mid 80s, let me say from the late 70s and the mid 80s, you know, Unilever was one of those companies that most people wanted to get their first job at, because they used to have good training programs for trainees. The benefits that they were giving to the guys, you know, even cars and all, and also just the fact that you started at Unilever. Most other companies would then recruit people who've already been well trained at Unilever. So for me, that was actually a very good start for you to actually start at Unilever.
And it was, funny enough, it's called the Unilever University, right? So it's where you go and post your university studies. So it was good grounding in terms of my first job. So yeah, still is.
Especially in the, you know, in the sales and marketing space. You know, I mean, there's so many of guys that I know who are my friends who started their careers there. If I'm not mistaken, I think Trico must have started there as well. Trico Thomas and a few other guys who are now big, you know, in the corporate.
No, there's lots of examples of Unilever people. I mean, when you look at the head of marketing at Nedbank, she's Unilever. The head of marketing at Standard Bank, ex-Unilever. The head of retail banking at Nedbank is, so there are quite a lot Unilever people around. It's one of those places.
Yes, you know, that and Nampek and Colgate and Palmolive.
Yeah,
you know?
and South African breweries.
and SAP, and yes, and
Yes.
SAP.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
those were like big companies. To some extent, Coca-Cola as well. You know,
Yes. Yes.
yeah. But anyway, so how did you find Durban? Different
Oh,
environment.
Durban,
To Grahamstown is a much bigger city. A lot of distractions, and
yes.
you know, we've already mentioned that you were a young man who
Yes.
had an eye on beautiful. Uh, so you must have
No,
found
Durban,
that side.
Durban was good. Durban was good. I did meet a lovely lady there
Yeah,
who ended up marrying,
yeah.
and we actually met at work. Um, uh,
At work,
so,
the policies of Unilever, didn't they forbid people from having those kind of relationships in the work?
and the challenging part was that she was also in human resources, so
Yeah,
that's even more crazy, right? So so it was that was Unilever days, but Durban was good. I still love it. I think I frequented quite a lot because it's my second home. But I
yeah,
think for me it's where one started to mature
yeah,
and start to think about life and
yeah,
be serious about life. But
yeah.
still, when I was there, I was more interested in the people that supplied us with services,
Mm,
you know, the ad agencies, because when we joined, we would be the orientation required us to go to different ad agencies to see what they do. And every time I was there, I was like, okay, so these guys don't work at Unilever, but these guys
yeah,
have got their own businesses. And
yeah,
how do these businesses come about? You know, and I still didn't get what that was and what it was called.
yeah,
You know, because I graduate, trying getting a job. Um, so everything is a first, your first apartment, your first car, your first everything. So you're busy with that, but there's still something at the back of your mind, just uh, questioning
yeah,
what everything is going on around you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So already then a seed was being planted in your head, you know,
Yes.
which you know was growing, and later on,
Yes.
actually, you know, pushed you to the direction of being an ads person. Because at Bravado now and the other companies that you formed before, it's all about,
Yes.
you know, advertising, and maybe broader marketing services.
Yes.
And you seem to have this liking of mass markets, and working
Yes.
with younger people. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then at some point, you know, after working for the corporate, which is Unilever, you know, what would you say you got out of that? Because I want us to get to you now being an entrepreneur. But looking at your period, you
Yeah.
know, working for Unilever, and also servicing, you know,
Yeah.
obviously you must have rotated where there's different products within
Yes.
Unilever. You know, there's, you
Yeah.
know, different products, and each one almost operates on its own.
Yeah. So I mean, at Unilever I worked. So would go with my boss and go and present, sell new products to Shoprite.
Yeah,
So when you look at Omo in Shoprite, it takes somebody to have gone to Shoprite and sell Omo, land it at the right price, make sure that it's advertised well because Omo is competing with other brands, right? So I
yeah,
worked on that business, but then I left, went to Kimberly Clark, sold a bit
yes.
of toilet paper and nappies as well.
So
Um,
you must have thought, ish, you know, remember the weeks just before the lockdown when
yeah,
everybody was talking
I was
about
like,
papers. You thought, you know what?
so the funny thing is, I'll tell you this, my first venture that failed before I got into properly sales and marketing was a mate of mine and I in, Eastgate
Yeah,
Industrial Park here in Marlborough. We had a
yeah,
toilet paper business
yeah.
because the reasoning was everybody goes to the toilet.
Hey,
So why
it
why
can't
can't
be.
it succeed? You know, but I'll tell you that story a bit later. So what I understood out of being in corporate, which still benefits for me now, is the importance of process. Um, Processes are the things that keep businesses going. Accountability,
Yes,
structure is very important, Professionalism is another thing that I learned and still have it with me now. And also just the passion for the product, and making sure that everybody in the business realizes that we're all in this together, right? So those are the things that I got, having worked at Kimberly-Clark, left Kimberly-Clark. Now it's Mondelez, but it used to be Kraft Foods, Nabisco.
Yes,
I worked there. And then my last job was at BP, where I was the head of what we used to call offer development. So looked after, the famous BP Coffee Wild Bean Cafe. So what we do is to make sure that whatever innovation we're developing lands well with clients. So I also learned the power of innovation in corporate. So that's, but then in the back, I had my very good friend was based in Malawi, and there was an opportunity to send printed T-shirts, caps, banners, and everything to Malawi. So I was already doing that on the side. I had my side hustle. Over the weekend, I'd pack boxes, put them in my car, pickup, drop them off at Park Station, put them on the bus to Malawi. He would get the T-shirts on the other side. We would deliver to a client there, and then you send the money back. Then we'll do it all over again, right? And that was when I was at BP. And then BP retrenched me, and I remember going home and saying, I think I want to try this thing full time. I'm not going to look for another job. And it was a scary time. I remember my retrenchment package then was about 160,000 Rand. I took that money and I said, I'll start a business. And then we bought toilet paper machines, took a loan from the bank, and we started making toilet paper.
And now, when you were doing that, you remember you said, as a marketer or a salesperson, you need to understand the needs of the market. Had you done any market research to look at the needs at the markets that you were actually selling to, or you just assumed, I know this is the need there?
So it was a terrible assumption. So the need is still there, because when you think about when you supply shopping malls, as an example, and you're a big supplier of the shopping malls in Joburg, you can imagine how many toilet rolls they buy. So from a marketing and sales perspective, we knew that there was an opportunity and we could be able to do. The one thing we didn't understand was how cutthroat that mass, like in terms of overly traded markets are, commodities, right? So when you think about Milli Mill as an example, Milli Mill is a commodity. Tiger brand sales, I think it's Ace, and the other people sell Iwisa. So you think everybody eats pap, yes. But the thing is, to make a profit on those businesses, you have to ramp up volumes. And we just had one machine, and we didn't, we would work 2 shifts late at night and still could not meet demand. But the challenge that we've also had was that in that market, because we were servicing a bottom end of the market at the plaza in town, was that regulation says a toilet roll needs to have 50 sheets, right? But that's 1 ply. 2 ply, it's 300 sheets. And what we didn't realize is that other manufacturers were cheating the system. What they would do is they would call it, I think it's puffing, remember, where they would just make the machine a bit loose. Then the sheet still looks like it's got 500 sheets, but maybe it's got 350, right? So they're selling that. People are buying, cheating people. So we were out of it. Within 18 months, we struggled as a business. We ran out of money and we shut the thing down. But luckily, the promotions business into Malawi was growing. So that's when we got clients like Unilever, Coca-Cola, and the like. So when that business failed, the impact wasn't that bad. It was, let's pack up, sell the machine. Okay, the landlord, a few months rent, we paid off the landlord. The other business funded that. Then we started focusing on the marketing business, doing exporting the stuff to Malawi and starting to find a few clients here.
Yeah. All right. So, and then what lessons did you learn out of that failure? Because you know why?
Yes.
When somebody fails at something, you
Yes.
know, sometimes we think it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
So looking back at that failure, because there
Yes.
is somebody who once wrote that, you know, failure is not the opposite of success. Actually, it's a stepping stone towards success.
Yes. So the one major thing that I learned, and I'll never ever do, is get into commodities. I am more of a high margin, low volumes person than a high volume, low margin person. That's the one thing I learned. The other thing I learned was don't make assumptions because you believe people consume something. So when you think about COVID-19, everybody got into masks, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody needed masks. And then suddenly Dis-Chem was given the monopoly to supply masks.
Yeah.
Then everybody who had masks in their home couldn't sell masks anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when COVID happened, with a friend of mine, we had an opportunity to supply one of the SOEs, and I was like, I don't think this is my thing, you know?
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, look at now, the SIU is investigating all these COVID things. So
yes, and some businesses that were there long before COVID, because of being tainted, they've now closed their bank accounts and everything. So even the original business is
exactly.
dead.
And you got into something that was not your main line, you know, and you sacrificed your other business. So the margin part for me was important. Trust as well, in terms of that I was not doing the selling myself. I had a salesperson. I was still thinking very corporate. So I think many entrepreneurs who leave corporate get that mistake quickly. They want to be the manager, the boss quickly. They know they want to run. Yeah, they want to feel like they're running something. You know, they want people reporting to them, and you know. So I had a salesperson, I had a factory manager, but I was not really involved in the process of the business in terms of selling, going to see clients myself, because I was managing the business, which is the corporate thing to do. You manage stuff, but those are things that have been built over time.
Yes.
So
and for you also, you just need to be able to know almost everything from the from the ground.
Exactly.
So that even though you are managing the guys, but you can be able to say, you know what, you are BSing me now, and you fire the guy if he has been doing, and you can do the work yourself.
Exactly. So when you're talking about the sales guy, he basically screwed me over. He used to go get money. Clients would pay him. He'd use the money. He would say the clients are gonna pay. So he was getting, because it was a cash business. So he'd go to town, sell the toilet rolls, paid cash up front. He's like, no, I'm offering them 7-day terms. He would use the money. Then suddenly the money wasn't coming in anymore. Then one day I got into my car, went to town and say, guys, but you owe us money. It's been 30 days. They're like, no, but we paid. We don't do payment terms with you guys. We pay you cash on delivery. And it was like 30,000 Rand later. And that time, being a small business, that's a lot of money. I mean, not even now, 30,000 Rand for any business is a lot of money, you know? So I learned my lessons then. So for me, it was, you have to be in the business. You have to be able to do every, if you can't do it physically, you need to be able to understand the process and the things around it, so that either they don't BS you, but because people resign, right? So if somebody decides, your key employee decides, hey, it's Monday, cheers, Bongani, I'm done. You can't seem to panic because they were the person that was good at selling or marketing or whatever it is. So you need to have the basic understanding of the function, because it also helps when you recruit the replacement. Yeah.
All right. So again, so you then found that now that somebody was stealing from you. Another lesson, yeah.
Yes.
Another lesson from you. And what did you do from that in terms of tightening now, managing the risk going forward?
Yes. Yeah. So that's when I decided to be involved in sales. I would put structures in place. I would call clients. I would do client calls, not necessarily doing the sales myself, but I would see clients every once a week, the big clients, have conversations with them.
Almost like customer relationship or key accounts.
Exactly, key accounts, right? So that's what I did. And for a while it worked. Before we ultimately, our machine couldn't fulfill the volumes and we had to close.
Right. And then to your next venture.
Yeah. So the marketing business kept going, and it started growing. And one of our biggest breaks was when we were given an account for SAB to do their promotion. So I always describe this to my mom when I was doing it. Was she asked me, so what do you do? So promotions is when you go into a spa and there's that young lady that asks you to taste the chips. And so we got into that, and because SAB, that was one of the key services to do, we got lots of huge volumes in terms of activations. So we had promoter girls going to taverns, going to nightclubs, promoting SAB brands. So that was a major break for us. I remember.
My understanding is that you can't be a teetotaler when you're doing that kind of work.
No, you can't. So it was tough. I remember once, and that's when I knew that I love entrepreneurship. So what we'd do is we had promotions in the East. So you're sending young ladies and gents from universities around Joburg to go and promote stuff in Benoni, right? At the taverns in Benoni or the nightclubs in Benoni or the bars. And I remember getting a call at 12 at night. We had a taxi guy we had hired. He was going to pick everybody up and drop them off at home because it was at night. And this guy switched off his phone. So these young people phone me, they're stressed, their parents are phoning me. And I took my car, it was a 7-seater that time, picked a few up, dropped them off. And I remember driving in my garage at 5 a.m. after doing all these drop-offs. And I said, do I want to keep doing this? And I said, this is a lesson. I want to keep doing this. We'll keep trying to find a new system. That's when I knew that this is my game. And I didn't give up. It was a tough night. It was a tough night. Driving, dropping people across Johannesburg. You can imagine it was a Toyota Fortuner then. It's a risky car. I was scared. I had my heart in my neck. I was like, I'm dropping some kid in Yeoville. And I was like, I will get hijacked. But when I got home, I was unfazed. I was like, come next weekend, we're out again. So that's when I knew.
Yeah. And so the name, The Salesman, when did it come up? Your that nickname, The Salesman.
The Salesman. So I remember with a friend of mine, we had this thing where we would joke that we want to be so good at selling that we can sell ice to an Eskimo, right? And we sell anything from mushrooms to tanks. We used to joke that way. And I remember once, as you've seen, you follow me on social media, I like to take pictures of my life and my experiences. Then I started this thing called Diaries of a Salesman, where when I traveled on the African continent, I would just document my experiences. So that's how it came about, The Salesman. So I've got this thing called Diaries of a Salesman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which has been, doing great work on mental health awareness this past few weeks.
Yes.
All right. So I want us to get to the point now, around you going through a very difficult time business-wise. To a point where it started to affect your mental health.
Sure.
So let's work towards that one now.
Yeah. So our business did very well. We ran it for 9 years. It was turning over about 18 million rand.
Yeah.
But in 2015, it was sort of like there was just a storm. We all know that South Africa's major economic issues started around end 2014, early 2015,
Yeah.
where clients were also struggling and budget cuts were coming through.
Yeah.
And I remember I knew the business was in trouble because we were now starting to battle to pay rent. We're starting to struggle to pay salaries. And we got a big payout from a client that canceled a contract. It was about 1 million rand.
Yeah.
The option that I had then was to retrench our staff, make the business smaller, and keep going. And I think there was a delusion of grandeur when you're operating at a certain level, right? Where you believe, because many times as an entrepreneur, you can't give up too quick, right? You always end up turning it around, you know? So there were times where the business struggled when you get a new client, you know, and it was that cycle. And I thought it was another cycle like that, you know? So I kept going and I didn't read the economic environment.
And you were losing money. You were not retrenching the people.
Exactly.
Because you were still keeping them, hoping that you're going to hit it big.
Exactly. And revenue was growing. And the sad part is that then I started borrowing money from the bank. When the bank couldn't give me more money, I borrowed money from family, from friends to keep feeding this beast. I remember posting to say, sometimes we use debt as our painkiller because as entrepreneurs, we don't want to make the tough choices. So we abuse our relationships with the bank, we abuse our relationships with friends and family because we want to feed our ego and we don't want to face the facts. So I was that guy. And then I remember it very well. We were hoping to get a contract with the National Lottery then.
Yeah.
And it was going to be about 22 million rand. And I remember for like 3 months, we worked and worked and we were almost there. And I was like, if we get this 22 million rand, it's going to sort out all our problems.
Yeah.
You know, and I kept borrowing and I wasn't telling the team, I wasn't retrenching. And then it was the 11th of September where they said, sorry, we're not going to do this contract. So revenues had, I think we were now turning over like 20,000 rand a month and we had like overheads of about 150. You can imagine how bad.
That's a difference of about 130K.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I had to make the call. I had to close the business, but you owing money to people. The landlord still wants his rent. You can't get out of the lease that quickly. The staff are upset because they feel that you sold them a dream that you can't help. And I quickly had to, at home, you've got responsibilities, you've got school fees. So everything is just compounding. And what I did not do right at that period was to probably write down my thoughts and my problems on a piece of paper and start tackling them one by one, right? And prioritizing them. And I think everything just got mishmashed in my head. The worst part was that I ended up going to work for a competitor. So they gave me a job because I needed to provide for home.
Yeah.
And I always document, I think going to work for that competitor was the worst decision that I ever made in hindsight for my mental health, because going into that building every day, I would leave my heart in the basement in my car and only my brain would go up.
Yeah.
I couldn't make a sales call. I couldn't do anything, but I didn't understand what was wrong. I used to run then for leisure. I would do maybe 5Ks, 10Ks. Suddenly, I couldn't even run a kilometer. I was having night sweats.
You were slowly getting into depression. You know,
Exactly.
So things that you used to derive joy from.
Exactly. So I was having night sweats. All I wanted in the morning was to eat mealie pap, right? So in the porridge in the morning, mealie porridge, that's all I wanted to eat. I would just drink water. I was losing weight. The kids would say, no, let's swim on weekends. I couldn't swim with them. And because Mondays were tough, because when Monday 8 o'clock came, everybody's calling for their money. You know, I looked forward to Friday because I would rest. And Monday would come.
I can identify with that.
Exactly. So, and the thing is, you're lying to people to say the money is coming, but the money is not coming. So you're not being honest. And so it's just becoming this snowball, whereby suddenly, I posted it about this week, whereby there was a day. So obviously, as coming from a Christian family, we had to pray this problem away. Although I was making bad decisions, we had to pray. I would wake up, I would do self-affirmations in the mirror. It was all being in denial of what was going on. Then I was making very funny business decisions. I remember we were once paid some money a client owed. Instead of paying people dead slowly, I took the whole lump sum, paid one person who was the loudest for the pen to go away, right? And then it was just becoming worse. Now, quickly later into 2016, things were becoming quite bad. There was lots of strain at home with the kids, you know, but I couldn't. I was like, doctor, I would sleep at 11 and wake up at 2 every day for like
again, and that's what we call insomnia.
Exactly.
So initial and terminal insomnia. Yeah.
Exactly.
So which is another sign of depression.
Exactly. And like I like 11, 2, I'm up, you know, and I would try to go for a walk. I couldn't. Then even physically, the tips of my fingers started having like it would just twitch and itch. And then I started having panic attacks. So I think about it now, there were panic attacks. And then I remember once speaking to my mom and I was crying. I couldn't stop crying. And I'm like, why am I crying? But I couldn't stop crying. And I tried to see psychologist, a life coach, but I would go 2 sessions, stop. 1, because I couldn't afford it. 2 was because I was just like scrambling to find answers, because all I wanted was my business.
At that time, did any of them at the time tell you that actually, my friend, you are sinking deeper into depression?
So they focused more on the problems that I was telling them that I was having rather than diagnosing it, right? So for them, it was more around, let's help you you get yourself out of this thing with your business. Until it was, I remember very well, I was sitting on the couch, whereby like during, they say with depression is you don't sleep when you need to sleep and you want to sleep when you don't have to sleep. So I was lying down on the couch and my aunt is a psychologist, and she said, she came to visit me, and she said, but you're depressed. I was like, huh? It's like, you need to seek help. You need to go see somebody. Then I went to see, I went to a Kiso clinic where I saw a psychiatrist. And that was the first time the psychiatrist said to me, she sat me down for like an hour and she says, you've got severe depression and anxiety. We need to sort it out. The option that you've got is we need to check you in. Otherwise you commit suicide. And I was like, no, you're not checking me in. I'm going to lose my job. You know, you've always got excuses. My family needs me, blah, 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 blah. But things were getting worse. I was like, I'd stopped eating. I'd lost, I'm like 85 now. Probably then I was like 75, right? All my clothes were big. And it got so bad that there was a week where my dad and I were playing a cat and mouse game, where I'll be like,
you wanted to go in.
You wanted, exactly, you do it because he's calling from Malawi every day. He's like, my son, you have to go in. Don't worry about the money, your job, everything. It's your life now that matters. And your kids need you, your family needs you, and you have to check yourself in. I'll be like, no, Dad, I'll go tomorrow. There's just one more project. And it was the depression again. It's almost like,
but you were in denial as well.
Exactly.
Typical man who doesn't want to accept you know, that actually you are in trouble.
Exactly.
Accepting defeat.
Exactly. So I've got this thing under control, right? And I remember there was a day, things were so bad at work. I wasn't delivering. A client was shouting at me. And I was in a room, a dark room. I phoned the South African drug and SEGA.
Yeah, SADC. South
SADC,
African
yeah.
Depression and Anxiety Group.
Yes, I phoned them and I was like, I feel like I'm gonna kill myself. I just want to die, you know? And they're like, no, they tried to talk me down. I was like, no, I just want it all over. I phoned a Kiso clinic. They're like, should we send an ambulance? I'm like, no, I'll come in the morning. And then I jumped off my bed, went to the toilet, took painkillers.
Yeah.
I think it was about like 15 tablets of like strong painkillers.
Yeah.
And the funny thing at that moment,
yeah,
I saw my son at 23 with a young lady in Sandton.
Yeah.
And the young lady says, tell me about your dad.
Mm.
And he just keeps quiet. And she says, but why are you not talking about your dad? You always just talk about your mom.
Yeah.
And he's so embarrassed to say his dad killed himself.
Yeah.
Right. And immediately I put my fingers in my mouth.
Yeah.
I vomited the stuff.
Mm.
Long story short, the next day I was admitted at a Kiso clinic. I remember for 2 hours, I fought my cousin because they said take his phone and laptop. He shouldn't have contact with the world because the phone and the laptop are causing him anxiety and depression because he's dealing with all these debt issues and stuff.
Yeah.
You have to take the phone. So after they took the phone, I was on suicide watch for 3 days. I was heavily drugged. And yeah, the journey from recovery started there.
Yes, but when you look at that experience now, firstly, the fact that it took you long to realize, you know, and we always assume that educated people, you know, they will easily see that now I'm, you know, I'm suffering from a mental illness.
Yes.
There you were, months on end, you know, with all these symptoms, things are going down, but nowhere in that period did you actually realize that you actually have depression. Even the professionals who saw you could not really put, you know, the picture, and yet you were actually deep in depression, and in fact you needed to be under the care of a clinical psychologist and a psychiatrist, but you were not doing that. And then eventually your parents and your family tell you, you know what, dude, you have to go in. And there you were playing cat and mouse. But eventually, you know, after, you know, suicidal ideation and suicidal attempt, you ended up going in. And that time you were in suicide watch, and the rest of the time it's normally about 21 days.
Yes, it was 21 days I was in,
Yeah, and in that time, when you look at that 21 days, what would you say about it in terms of helping you to turn around the situation?
I think for me, there were three major things that happened to me that time, right? It was firstly was accepting that failure is an event and not a person. Like my life was not over. It was a failed business. It was dead. I just had to face what I needed to face and sort it out. So it was around structuring my thoughts. The one thing that the psychologist said to me was, because I'm a person that never likes disappointing people. I had disappointed myself in how I'd behaved. And I felt that I deserved everything that was happening to me. So it's almost like I was self-loathing and self-punishing. And the one thing that the psychiatrist said to me is that you need to forgive yourself, because self-forgiveness is the start to healing and everything else. And the third thing was my responsibilities to my children. I always say everybody in my life has got a choice to come in and out. You and me right now decided to have this conversation. Our kids did not choose to be here. We brought them here. So who was I to leave them and move on and bail out in whatever form, right? But all that happened because you see a social worker, you see a clinical psychologist, you see a psychiatrist, you do the color therapy, you do the group sessions. So when I was there, I decided that I need to get better. So I was not messing and playing around. I was like, I'm not coming back here, you know? So whatever it needs, because I'm quite a rebellious person, I guess it's a maverick entrepreneur in me. So I was like, this thing. I was like, no, I'm not coming back here. Whatever I need to do to get out of here, I do it. So that's what happened in those 21 days. When I left on the 21st day, I was ready. Even the psychiatrist said, you make it. You've got the right attitude. Because they always get return people, right? So people go 21 days, don't go through the program, go back, mess around. But I mean, I would meet the people, it was their third, fourth time. And I guess everybody's journey is different. I'm not judging them because depression is a very difficult thing to pin down. It really can drag you. But for me, I said, I'm not coming back here.
Yeah. But there's one part I just want us to go back to, Bongani.
Yes.
Because often when we hear that somebody, have committed suicide, I'll use that word, although it's no longer politically correct to use that word. You say somebody died of suicide, but you don't say you committed suicide. But anyway, when you look back at that moment, the suicidal thoughts, that moment when you decided, I'm taking these tablets, what was going through your head?
I think I just wanted it all to end. And I don't think, when I think back, something deeper takes over. It's unexplainable. It's not you. You're not in your thoughts, but you are. It's a strange thing. And that is why the talk of chemical imbalance around depression and anxiety. I think the darker side of you takes over and convinces the braver side to say it's done. You wake up, you're feeling useless, you're feeling unloved, you don't love yourself, you hate yourself, you can't look yourself in the mirror, you just want it all to end. You just like, this is the best way for me to end it, and I think that's what happened at that moment. I remember it quite vividly. But yeah, that's what happened.
Yes, and again, when one looks at the literature relating to depression, there is a part about different personalities are more at a higher risk of, committing suicide, and also just depression itself. And some of the people, who are top achievers, people who set very high standards for themselves, people who have never tasted failure, people who, who see failure as like the end of the world. Those kind of people are actually seen as a higher risk compared to the average population. And you'd find that they would rather kill themselves, through suicide than actually, it's like what they say, what are people going to say? I was this guy, I was this achiever, I was this person who's never failed, and all of a sudden, failure next to my name, and yet, I mean, most successful people in life have tasted failure, sometimes not once, many times, and they dust themselves up, and they are actually now big people in technologies and in many other things, the people that we look up to. So there's actually nothing wrong in accepting that at that point we have failed. What's important is that you must then dust yourself at some point and look at what next.
So I mean, I sit and look back in terms of my life, right? So I'd never really failed at anything major, right? So almost everything that I put my mind to, I passed. I was never like an A student, but I never repeated a grade. I got my license the first time. I got my first degree, my only degree the first time. My first job interview, I got the job. So it's that base. I mean, you obviously struggle at work, you don't get promoted, but it's never a big thing because you fix, you know what to do. You fix one or two things. And I think for me, this was the major thing where it was just the calamity was just too much, you know, and I couldn't accept that it's happening to me. And I think that was the struggle for me in terms of, so then what now? And I wanted the fix. So I wanted to, like, how do I fix this? How do I fix it? Because even at work, when people, I'm that person where somebody says, this is the problem, I listen and say, okay, so what do we do now? You know? And when the business was failing, the what do I do now was a struggle.
Wow. Okay. All right. So, but since that time, you haven't gone back to Akiso, right?
No, I haven't. Since so after I left Akiso, I saw the clinical psychologist for about 3 months. My psychiatrist like twice. Then I was on antidepressants for about 6 months. And I don't advise everybody in terms of how I got onto antidepressants. But I decided I was going to get off because I didn't want to depend on them, because I was using antidepressants and sleeping pills, and it was starting to affect me. Then that's when I got into exercise. So what I decided to do, I remember somebody advising me to say, don't just come off them immediately. And again, this is not medical advice. This was my journey. Was instead of taking them every day, was skip a day and see how you feel, and then skip 2 days and see how you feel. And I started running, and I saw that it helped me. My confidence came back, and I think being back when I started with Elevator again, being in front of clients, dressing well, eating well, going to meetings, slowly my confidence
putting nice spectacles.
Yes, you know, us and our spectacles, you know, that they always help. You know, us nerds. So those were the things that added to my healing process.
Because you know, when you exercise, I mean, we always say that when you are dealing with, you know, something like depression, you need a holistic, you know, approach to healing. Yes, there are the tablets that the doctors give you. There is psychotherapy that you are getting, but there are other physical things that you need to look at. One of those is, you know, exercise, because it makes you to produce the happy hormones, the endocrine. You know.
And you know the funny thing, the one thing that I loved after, and I still love it until today, is ironing. So when what the doctor had said is that when you're starting to have depressive thoughts, just don't sit in the house, right? Clean, just like try to occupy your thoughts. And I found my keep moving, if I can't go out and run at night, was to iron clothes.
You know, that's, you know, what that is what they call positive distraction.
Yes.
You know, a coping mechanism. You know, get involved in something that is positive, that will benefit either yourself or others, you know. And whilst it doesn't mean that you've forgotten about your underlying problem, but you are doing something that actually is positive for self and others.
100%. So like serving the community, and I've also found like being and listening to other people's stories at that time and just sharing my journey helped. But yeah, so I've never seen this. It was 2016. It's what now? Going to 5 years, going to 6 years. But what I've also learned is not to take it for granted that depression can always come back. And I remember when lockdown was going to happen. And everybody was talking about business failure and people losing their jobs and everything. And I remember consciously having a plan of going into lockdown, to be reading, to be finding a way to keep active, to surround myself with people that are for me, people that are positive, to avoid triggers at that time. And funny enough, I lost my job in lockdown as CEO of HDI, but I did not struggle to move on as fast as I did before, because mentally I was ready and prepared. And when we immediately, I remember, I think it was the 13th of May, when they said we can go out and run or something. That's when they allowed 5 kilometers of exercise.
Yeah.
I was already out running,
Yeah.
you know, before I would even run in the complex. I used to do 3 kilometers every day just to keep those endorphins going. So I don't take it for granted that I'm healed, thank God, but I don't take it for granted that triggers can come and cause problems.
Yes. Now, there's one thing I didn't ask you about. You know, you came from this strong Christian, family.
Yes.
Did that play any role in terms of, giving you hope and the meaning of life? Because that's one component, or that's one thing that, spirituality does.
Yeah.
Obviously, spirituality is broader than religion, but that's one
Yes.
thing that it does. It gives you hope.
Yeah.
It also gives you a meaning. Did you
Yes.
tap into that part of you as part of your arsenal, to help
Yeah.
you recover?
So the funny thing is, my previous church, because I don't go there anymore, also struggled with helping me with what I was going through. And because it is what it is.
Yeah.
But my belief in God and the higher power kept me centered and believing that this was not the end. That there was probably a greater meaning. And when I look back, these is the conversations that I believed that there was a greater purpose that I didn't. And I don't know how many people are currently listening to this, but I always say that even if I help one person, my job would have been done. My pain that I went through, the process that I survived would not have gone to waste.
Yeah. All right. And now recently you've taken up mountain biking.
Yes.
But before you answer that, there's some comments, or I think a comment or two that have come through, and I would like just our support lady to read those comments whilst you're thinking about, we've got 10 minutes to go, which should be done by past. Yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Doc and Mr. Chinkanda. We have one comment from Nandi Pakasha. She wrote, I'm picking up key principles that can be applied to any organization here, private or public. Being a public service manager, I have realized the importance of treating public service as a business. So that's the only one we have so far. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to comment on that? Although it's not directly, it was more real about
about business. I think for me, everybody needs to. I always say, you first need to look at yourself as a business, whether you're employed or run a business. You offer a product and a service to a customer, and the customer pays for it, right? And I always struggle with the level of entitlement that us as a country sometimes have got. So even when you're an employee, you run a business, you are the product. You need to make sure that you're developing your product, you're innovating through studying, through all sorts of things, because you need to always sell to the highest bidder, right? But then when you are working there, you also need to make sure that you see it as a business, because you're responsible for delivering either a product or a service. So when you look at the fact that we're struggling with, and I was saying to you earlier on to say, load shedding is going to start at 5 o'clock. Clearly the people that work at that SOE, which is ESCOM, never saw that what they're doing is running a business, right? And that is why we are here, because it's not a going concern anymore. And because everybody in the value chain, from the then CEO to the person at the call station and everybody, I'm not saying they are not hardworking people at ESCOM, but I don't think that business mindset to say, we've got customers, which is the South African public, we're delivering a product to them, and we need to make sure that the product is delivered on time and every time.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think it's very, very important, because otherwise, even SOEs, which are supposed to be funded by, the national fiscus, but we are now in a situation where everything is constrained. So that, that resource, it's not, bottomless. The taxpayers can only do so much to actually try and save some of these entities.
100%.
Yes. So yeah, mountain biking as we go towards wrapping up.
Yes. So being a runner, last year I injured myself, and it's an injury that keeps, every time I run, it keeps coming back, you know. And then a friend of mine had a bike in the garage all the time. Then a friend was, why don't you try biking? And I started riding in the neighborhood, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. Then I went home to Malawi in December. I hadn't been home because of my financial problems for the longest time. So it was firstly being at home with the parents, but being in the country. Then he's a farmer, so I would go to his farm and would ride, and I just fell in love with it. It's one, being in nature. I mean, even when I came back, I've been on the road with a couple, like proper road biking, and I don't like it as much as I like mountain biking. So for me, it's my time alone. It's learning something new. So you have to learn the bike, the different skills and all that. But it's also just my time alone. So on Saturdays, my family knows 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm out in my car. I go look for different trails around Gauteng, spend time there, come back after 3-4 hours, buy myself a coffee on my way. But it's just time. I think it's important that, especially as entrepreneurs, parents, you've got lots of demands on a day-to-day as a person. And sometimes we get so stressed because we don't give time to ourselves and self-care. And I'm not saying it should be mountain biking or running, but it's important. It can be a hobby that should be away from your day-to-day responsibilities, because that's when you reconnect on who you are and what you're trying to do. And it's just time for you to think. And then, being the person that I am, quite competitive with myself, always wanting to achieve, I decided, why don't I enter marathons? So I did my first marathon last month, which is 70 kilometers. It's the most physically grueling thing I've ever done in my life. Being on a bike for 5.5 hours, I never thought I would do it. But you're out, literally up in the mountains, you're going up. And I write about, and I learn lessons with my training, because I also swim, and I do strength training now. I always use those interactions for me as lessons to life. So I remember posting about don't get off the bike. It was like at 56 kilometers, there was a gentleman. So what they do is they've got these guys called sweepers. They're the guys that ride to find the last person, right? And they found me. So here I was, the last person at my first race. And I'm like, damn, am I that horrible? I'm already starting to have those thoughts in my head. Then I'm like, no, I'm not. Anyway, let me just finish. It's not about winning. It's about me finishing this thing. And then I found a gentleman. He was tired. It was 56 kilometers. He's like, I give up. I'm done. And there was this hill. And I was like, I'm not getting off the bike. If I get off the bike, I'm not going to finish this race. And I posted about it, about saying, one thing that I've learned as we come to a close about life, it's about not getting off the bike. Because even if you're just paddling in the softest gear and you're just spinning, the bike is moving. It's not moving as fast as you want when it's downhill, but know that even if it's tough on that uphill, there's always a downhill.
Keep moving.
So never get off the bike. So I didn't get off the bike again until I finished. So my second one I'm training for is end of June, and it's a series of 6. And then the crazy friend of mine, the farmer in Malawi, growing up in Malawi, you always go to the Lake Malawi, one of the most beautiful places. So we'd go as a family to the cottage, like people would go to Durban from Johannesburg. So it's 250 kilometers. So my friend Alex and I, in August, in awareness of mental health, we're riding for 3 days from Blantyre to the lake, 60 kilometers a day. Just because we can, but also for mental health awareness.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You see, now this thing has grown beyond you. It's now about others. You know, it's about saying, I was once there. I know what it takes to actually get out of that hole. And I want to be the example to people that, you know what, you must not give up. If you trip and fall, but you can still, stand up and actually move forward.
100%.
For me, that's exactly the reason why I asked you to come and share your story here, because I found that such a powerful story to encourage people, and just for people to know that entrepreneurs, it's a very high risk, space or career choice, because you have very little time to yourself.
100%.
It's a very lonely job. And when stuff happens, you usually the one who will, get paid last. Everybody else has to get paid. You, the last one. And sometimes you keep things away from other people because you don't want them to see you as a failure. You sold them a dream, and the dream is not working out. So I just want to thank you, man, Bongani, as we close, because for me, this story, it is a very, very important story of the triumph of the human spirit, over adversity. And by the way, everybody can, everybody can actually survive, that lowest point. Obviously, it helps to have the necessary professional support. It helps to have the, the social support system. And it also helps to actually have a belief system. And belief system is not about just going to church, it's about you and the connection with the creator, So all of those ingredients, they actually help one to recover and look back. And at some point, you look back at what you've gone through and say, you know what, this is the best thing ever to happen to me. Because it taught me lessons, it forced me to dig deep, get to know, my resilience levels. And with what I've gone through, there's very few things that now can actually get me back to the same point.
100%, 100%. And thank you for having me and for the great work that you're doing in the health space. I think it's something that's needed, and keep having these great conversations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bongani. And I hope your parents were watching in Malawi.
My dad said he was. Yeah.
You can send the YouTube link. I'll send you the YouTube link.
Please do that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nwasa, for standing there for the questions. And I want to thank everybody who joined in. It was supposed to be 60 minutes, but we could not rush this story. It was such an important story, and I wanted that the last 30 minutes should focus on the issues of mental health. And he did a very great job to just take us through to understand what he went through, and also to just demonstrate that, yes, you can go through depression, but you can also survive it as well. But it is important to know that at a certain point, you need to be under the care of professionals. You can't do it alone. With those words, I want to say thank you, and until next time.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you.